Hi and welcome again to Excel's Master Course. In the previous lesson we learned everything about data types. In this lesson we will learn about functions. Are you ready? But before everything, if you want us to keep working, make sure you clicked on subscribe and notifications button, and if you liked the video, give us like. In this lesson you gonna learn the difference between functions, formulas, and metrics, ranges and range types. Text functions. Before anything we need to know about three things and the difference between them: functions, formulas, and metrics. Let's start with functions. Let's talk about the general and mathematical concept of function. Function is a relation between set of inputs. Each one of them has one unique output. For Excel concept, function is an Excel built-in formula that allows you to perform mathematical, statistical, and logical operations. Now let's talk about formulas. Formula is a fixed pattern that used to do consistent results. Let's talk about Excel concept of formula. Formula is defined as a statement written by the analyst to perform operation. As we said, functions is an Excel built-in formulas. That means function is a prepared formula in Excel. And that means every function is formula. But not every formula is a function. Now let's talk about metrics. Metrics are set of calculations help a business measure aspects of their operations. As a data analyst, you have to understand and work with metrics professionally. In this course we will talk about metrics. And in upcoming specialized courses we will talk about it so many times. Now let's talk about introduction feature that is so important in so many things and also important for functions and formulas. The range. Range is a group of selected cells, or addressed together. Let's try an example of some function which we gonna talk about in upcoming sessions. But first let's increase this symbol of data using autofill feature, which we gonna talk about in the next minutes. As you see, range of selected cells defined by the upper left cell and the lower right. Let's talk about this autofill. For example, if I want to sum all of these values, use sum function. First enter it in the first cell. Then when the cursor turn to this shape, drag it till you want. This operation used with a type of range is called relative range. That defined as when I move, the range moves with me. If I want the range to be fixed and doesn't move, this range called absolute range. In Excel, the absolute range defined by put $sign before the name of the column and the number of row of the beginning and ending cell of the selected range. Look, it's not moving. Now let's talk about the main topic of this session. Functions which used with qualitative data, or text functions. But before that, let's talk about general features that you have to know about formulas and functions in Excel. Function or formula must be begun by equal sign. Formula could be data, mathematical or statistical operation, function, or even another cell range. But remember, if the original cell has been changed, the other cell will be changed. Let's talk about substitute function. Substitute is used for changing some letters and words in specific cell. It doesn't change the text in the original cell. It changes it in other cell. Not like find and replace, which we gonna talk about in data cleaning sessions. Let's type in this cell the sky is blue. I want to change it in other cell to the sky is yellow. In this cell I will type equal sign, substitute, open parenthesis. This the text refers to the whole text that I want to edit it, which located in the cell A1. And this the old text refers to the letters which I want to changes them. So open quotes blue. And this the new text is yellow. It has been changed. Fantastic. Let's talk about search functions. I don't know if they called like that, but I like to call them like that. Let's starting by left. Left is a function that prints to you the number of letters that you select. Starting from the left, let's take an example to better understand it. You remember the first example of the sky is blue. If I want this cell to have the value of the word the, so first equal sign, left, the text located in the cell A1. And the number of the characters which I want starting from the left are 3. Here it is. The word the. Now let's talk about right function. Right is a function that prints to you number of letters that you select, starting from the right. For this cell, if I want this cell to have the word blue, so equal right. And open parenthesis. The text is in cell A1. And the number of desired letters starting from the right is 4. Let's do this again with cell B1. I want cell D1 to have the value of word yellow. So here equal right. Then open parenthesis. The text is in cell B1. And the number of desired letters starting from the right is 6. Here it is. Now let's talk about mid function. Mid is a function that prints to you the specific number of letters based on the first letter's number of its scope, which defined by you, and the number of characters that you want, but add 1 to it. I know it's a little bit confused, let's try. For this example I want to get the value of sky in this cell. For this example I want to get the value of sky in this cell. So equal mid. Open parenthesis. The text is in the cell A1. And the sky word in this cell started from the fourth letter in the cell. And the number of letters in this word is 3, but add 1 to it, so it's 4. For the second example, I want to get the value of word is from this cell to this. So equal sign mid. Then open parentheses. The wanted text is in cell B1. The word is starting from the 9th letter in the cell. And it contains 2 letters but add 1 to them, so it's 3. And here it is. Now let's talk about find. Find is a function that gives you the order of a specific character that you want to find out in specific cell. Let's try it. For example, if I want to give this cell the value of the word the using find and left functions. So first equal find. Open parentheses. The find text is the text which I want to now its order, so it's space. The text that I want is in the cell A1. And I want to start from 0, so start number will be blank. So the first space is the 4th letter in the cell. Then equal left. Open parentheses. Text is in cell A1. And the number of letter is the find product -1. It's done. Let's take another advanced example. If I want to give this cell TE value of the word sky using mid and find functions. So equal find open parentheses. The find text is space between quotes. Comma text is in cell A1. The start number that I want find to start from is after the first space. So it will be the product of the find function that we created in the previous example +1. So it is the 8th. Then equal mid. Open parentheses. Text required is in the cell A1. Start from the first find product. Number of characters is the second find minus the first find, and don't forget +1. Len is a function that used to tell you how many letters in specific cell. For example, I want to know how many letters in this cell. There are 15 letters. In this lesson you have learned the general information about functions and some of text functions. Check OU information in the quiz below in the description. Thank you for pay attention. Don't forget to subscribe and apply notification and like the video. See you in the next session. Hi and welcome again to Excel's Master Course. In previous session we learned a little bit about text functions. In this session we will complete it. Are you ready? But before everything, if you want us to keep working, make sure you clicked on subscribe and notifications button, and if you liked the video give us like. Let's continue what we have started in the last session. Text functions. Now we will talk about concatenate function. Concatenate is a function that used to merge the text in two different cells or more in one cell. Let's take an example. If I have this data set that has the first name column and the last name column, and I want to merge them in name column. So equal concatenate. Open parenthesis. First text is in cell A1. And second is in cell B1. They merged. Let's use autofill to do it with the whole rows. Done. Now let's talk about exact function. Exact is text function that compares the text in two different cells, and if they completely the same, it will print true, and if not, it will print false. Let's compare these two cells using exact. Equal exact. Open parenthesis. D2. E2. Yet it's true, because they are completely the same. Let's compare these two. Equal exact then. Open parenthesis. C2. D2. Yet it's false. Now let's talk about fixed function. Fixed is a function that used to format a number as a text with a fixed number of decimals. If I want this number to be as text, so I will use fixed function. So equal fixed. Open parenthesis. C1. And 3 number behind the decimal point. That is it. Now let's talk about upper function. Upper is a function that used to set text in specific cell to uppercase in other cell. Let's try it with this cell. Equal upper. Open parenthesis. E2. Done. Now let's talk about lower function. Lower is a function that used to set text in specific cell to lowercase in other cell. Let's try it with this upper function product. Equal lower. Open parenthesis. Yeah, here it is. Now let's talk about proper function. Proper is a function that used for capitalize the first letter of each word of text in specific cell in other cell. Now let's try it with this cell. Equal proper. Open parenthesis. That is it work. Now let's talk about replace function. Replace is a function that replaces some characters in specific text by others in other cell based on starting point and number of characters. For example, I want to replace the word James in this cell by the word John in other cell. So equal replace. Open parenthesis. Text is in cell H4. Word James starts from the 9th letter in this cell. Word James contain 5 characters. And the word that I want to replace James' word by is John. Here it is done. Now let's talk about trim function. Trim is a function that remove extra spaces from text in specific cell. Let's talk an example. Let's add another space in this cell between these words. I want to fix this text in this cell. So equal trim. Open parenthesis. And here it is. Now let's talk about repeat function, which be summarized like this. Repeat is a function that repeats text in specific cell for a number of times that defined by you. Let's repeat this text in this cell for 3 times. So equal repeat. Open parenthesis. The cell range, comma, 3. In this session and the previous one you learned everything about text functions. Check information in the quiz below in the description. Thank you for pay attention. Don't forget to subscribe and apply notification and like the video. See you in the next session. Hi and welcome again to Excel's Master Course. In previous session we have learned about text functions. In this session we will talk about numerical functions. Are you ready? But before everything, if you want us to keep working, make sure you clicked on subscribe and notifications button, and if you liked the video, in this session you gonna learn simple math operations in Excel, which are addition, subtraction, multiplying, division. Let's begin with simple math functions and formulas. Let's talk about addition process in Excel. Addition process in Excel can be performed by the function sum, or type the formula manually. Let's try it in Excel. Let's first create a random sample of number, horizontally and vertically. I want to sum all of these value on this cell. So equal sum. Open parentheses. The range of summed values. They have been summed. Another way is to do it by this simple formula. But it is inefficient with a large amount of data. Now let's talk about subtraction process in Excel. There is no standard way or direct formula in Excel to do subtraction, equal sign, but we gonna teach you some other ways. Plus sign. Number 1 is the normal formula. Plus sign. It is the most popular way for subtraction. Plus sign. Number 2 is to use sum function but put equal sign before the number that you want to subtract. Remember when you were in high school and your math teacher in some proofs when he did this, it is the same. Number 3 is to use function called msub. It is used with complex numbers. If you don't know what are the complex numbers, it is okay. We only want to know that it can do the subtraction easily. Let's try it in Excel. Now let's try the simple formula. Let's try equal sign. C5. Minus sign. C4. That is it. Let's try it with multiple values. Equal sign. F7. Minus sign. E5. Minus sign. C4. Minus sign. C2. Now let's try subtraction with sum function. Equal sum. Open parentheses. F5. Comma. Minus sign. F6. That is right, 9 minus 10 is minus 1. Now let's try it with multiple values. Equal sum. Open parentheses. F8. Comma. Minus sign. E5. Comma. Minus sign. C3. It minus 4. Now let's try m sub function. Equal m sub. Open parentheses. D5. Comma D2. Now let's talk about multiplying process in Excel. Multiplying process in Excel can be performed by the simple formula or function product. Let's try it in Excel. Let's try the simple formula equal sign. Open parentheses. F7, then in the keyboard Shift 8. E6. It's 11 tens. Now let's try the simple formula with the multiple value equal sign. F6 Shift 8. E4 Shift 8. D6 Shift 8. C4 Shift 8. Now let's try product. Equal sign. Open parentheses. F6 comma. F7. Let's try another product. Now let's talk about division process in Excel. The division process in Excel can be performed by the simple formula and the quotient function. But let's talk about quotient because it is not like the normal division. Quotient prints the integer of the division and don't print any number behind the decimal point. For example, 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. But quotient 5(2) will print 2. Let's try it in Excel. Now let's try the simple formula for division. Equal sign. F4. Slash. F6. Now let's try the quotient function. Equal sign. Quotient. Open parentheses. F6. Comma. F1 it is equal to. But if you try quotient 12 and 5, it will be also 2. As we say, quotient doesn't print decimal numbers. In this lesson you have learnt what you have to learn about math operations in Excel. Check OU information in the quiz below in the description. Thank you for pay attention. Don't forget to subscribe and apply notification and like the video. See you in the next session. Hi and welcome again to Excel's master course. In the last session we have learned about the math function. In this session we will continue the numerical functions. But before everything, if you wanna us to keep working, make sure you clicked on subscribe and notifications button, and if you liked the video, in this session you gonna learn about statistical functions in Excel, which we gonna launch specialized course about it in the near future. Now let's talk about mean operation in Excel. Mean, known as the average of the values. It can be performed by several ways on Excel. The first is use the function average. The second is to use formula contains two functions. Sum, which we talked about in the previous session, and count, which we gonna talk about in the upcoming session. This way can be done by dividing the sum function product by the count function product. I know that this way is pretty complex, but we in analytics world want you to improve your logic and brain skills. Let's try it in Excel. Let's get the mean or the average of all of these values. So equal average. Open parentheses. The range of the values. It is 8.5. Let's try it by the second way. Equal sum. Open parenthesis. The range of the selected values. Then slash. Then count. The range of values. It is the same 8.5. Now let's try if the function average has a condition. Or the function known as average_if. It does the same operation of average but for the values that has its condition. Let's try it in Excel. Let's try to get the average of these values, but I want to get the average of values greater than 7. So equal average_if. Open parenthesis. The selected range. Then the criteria. But don't forget the double quotes before and after the criteria. It is 10. Let's check it with the normal average. It is also 10. So that is right. Now let's talk about the median operation in Excel. Median is the middle number in the data set. In Excel there is function called median to calculate the median. Let's try it in Excel. Let's try to calculate the median for all of these values. So equal median. Open parenthesis. Specify the range. And enter. It equals 8.5. Now let's talk about the mode. Mode is the most repeated value in the data set. There is function called mode to calculate it. Let's try it in Excel. Let's try to calculate the mode for this data set. So equal mode. Open parenthesis. Specify the range. Enter. The most repeated value is 1. Now let's talk about getting minimum value in Excel. There is function called min. It prints the minimum value in the data set. Let's try it in Excel. Let's create a random number in this cell using rand function. Let's get a sample of data by it. Horizontally and vertically. Now let's get the minimum value this data set. Equal min. Open parenthesis. Specify the range. Here it works. Now let's talk about getting maximum value in Excel. There is function called max. It prints the maximum value in the data set. Let's try it in Excel. Let's create another random number by rand function. Let's get another sample of data by it. Horizontally and vertically. Now let's get the maximum value this data set. Equal max. Open parenthesis. Specify the range. Here it works. In this session you have learned a little bit about statistical functions in Excel. Check OU information in the quiz below in the description. Thank you for pay attention. Don't forget to subscribe and apply notification and like the video. See you in the next session. Hi and welcome again to Excel's Master Course. In the previous session we have talked a little bit about the statistical function. In this session we will continue the statistical functions. But before everything, if you want us to keep working, make sure you clicked on subscribe and notifications button, and if you liked the video, in this lesson you gonna learn about calculating variance in Excel. Quick overview about descriptive statistics. Now let's talk about some new statistical concept. Variance is a statistical measurement of the spread between numbers in a data set. Like others, we gonna talk about it in details in descriptive statistics course. But right now we focus in calculating it using function called var.p. Let's generate a sample of data and calculate the variance to it. Now let's calculate the variance. So equal variance.p. Now let's try to give you a quick overview about the descriptive statistics. Brief informational coefficients that summarize a given data set, which can be either a representation of the entire population or a sample of a population. Descriptive statistics performs that by its measure of center, like mean, median, mode, and its measure of spread, like minimum, maximum, standard deviation. and variance. In this video view we completed the topic of statistics in Excel. Check OU information in the quiz below in the description. Thank you for pay attention. Don't forget to subscribe and apply notification and like the video. See you in the next session. Hi and welcome again to Excel's Master Course. In the previous sessions we have talked about statistical function. In this session we will start talking about logical ones. Are you ready for this session? In the moment that this episode has been created we have 1.5k subscribers. We wanna reach 2k before ending of September. We trust you guys to achieve our goal. In this session you gonna learn about logical functions like if, VLOOKUP, if NA, if error, and logical gates functions like AND, OR, NOT. Let's begin by the definition of the logical functions. Logical function is function in Excel that has a conditions, and it's used to test whether a situation is true or false. Now let's talk about not logical gate. Let's start with the normal if. It's a function that tests if the condition that you provide is true or false. Then takes the action based on the result that you have input to it. The function if has three sections. First, the logical test or the condition that you want to test. Second is the value if true or what you want to do if the result of the test is true. Third is the value if false or what you want to do if the result of the test is false. Let's try to do it in Excel. Let's imagine that I have data set for sell us in specific hours in Monday and Sunday and I want to know which hours have the best sales in these days. So equal if, open parenthesis. In the logical test B2 greater than A2. If true, print Monday rules. And if not, print Sunday rules. Let's use autofill to print it to other values. Now let's talk about one of the most important functions in Excel. VLOOKUP. It's a function that used to find the value in the same row with known value, based on the known value and the number of columns between them. Let's try to do it in Excel. Let's CKN this column if Sunday rules or Monday. So equal VLOOKUP. Open parenthesis. Lookup value is in cell A2. Table array is all of these values. And the value which we want in the third column. We can use the autofill to the other values. But there are few things you have to know about VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP looks to your wanted values based from to starting point to the right. Not the opposite. Let's better understand it in Excel. Let's try to get the first value in this table array by knowing the third value. So now equal VLOOKUP. Open parenthesis. The lookup value is C2. And the table array is all of these data. And I want the value which in first row. It prints NA, or non-available. So pay attention guys to something like this. And that leads us to the next function. But what if I want to replace this NA by an understandable message. Then you will use function called ifNA. ifNA. It's function that used to replace NA or non-available by understandable message. Let's try to do it in Excel. For the previous example I want to replace NA with please review your formula again. So equal ifNA. Open parenthesis. VLOOKUP. Open parenthesis. And enter the same parameters of the previous example. Then close parenthesis. Type the message in double quotes. Now let's talk about ifError function. It is a function can be used to convert the error traditional message by understandable message. Let's try to do it in Excel. Let's do the same fault with VLOOKUP but with ifError. So ifError. Open parenthesis. And enter the same VLOOKUP function. And if there are some errors, prints that there are some errors in your formula. Now let's talk about logical gates functions. Let's start with AND gate. It's a logical gate that prints true when all conditions are true. Let's try to do it in Excel. Let's check if these 2 hours have sales or not by checking if them values are greater than 0 or no. So equal AND. Open parenthesis. The logical condition 1 which is A2 greater than 0. And logical condition 2 which is B2 greater than 0. Now let's talk about OR gate. It is a logical gate has value of 2 or when at least one condition you have input to it is true. Let's try to do it in Excel. Let's check if that any hour in Sunday has sales. And let's check if there are at least 1 hour has sales. So equal OR. Open parenthesis. And let's check if there are at least 1 hour has sales. Now let's talk about NOT logical gate. It's a logical gate that reverse the value of the logical condition. In means of if the value of the logical condition is true it prints false and if false it will prints true. Let's check if there is no hour in Sunday has 0 sales or below. So equal NOT open parenthesis. A2 less than or equal 0. Let's use the autofill feature for the other values. In this session you have learned a little bit about logical functions in Excel. Check OU information in the quiz below in the description. Thank you for pay attention. Don't forget to subscribe and apply notification and like the video. See you in the next session. Hi and welcome again to Excel's Master Course. In today's session you will give you a purview about the financial analysis. Are you ready? Finally guys! We did it! Now we have 2,000 subscribers. Thank you so much. We will do our best to you. Let's talk about the financial concepts and metrics. We gonna talk about it again in details in the financial analysis course. Let's talk about this major in general. Financial analysis is the process of evaluating the financial performance of a company or project. It involves examining the company's financial statements, such as the balance sheet, income statement, cash flow. Financial analysis is used by a variety of stakeholders, including investors, creditors, and managers. There are many different roles involved in financial analysis like financial analyst. Financial analysts are responsible for collecting, analyzing, and interpreting financial data. They use their findings to create reports and recommendations that can be used to make informed financial decisions. And also investment analysts research and evaluate potential investment opportunities. They use financial analysis to assess the risk and return potential of different investments. And also credit analysts. They assess the creditworthiness of borrowers. They use financial analysis to evaluate the borrower's ability to repay a loan. And also risk analysts. They assess the risks associated with different financial investments and decisions. They usually use financial analysis to identify, measure, and manage risk. Now let's talk about some financial concepts, calculations, and metrics. Present value, PV, is the current value of a future sum of money, discounted at a given interest rate and number of periods. For an example, if you are investing $100 today, at an interest rate of 5% per year, the PV of the investment is $95.24. This is because the $95.24 will grow to $100 in 1 year at an interest rate of 5%. Now let's talk about future value, FV. Is the value of a present sum of money in the future, given a certain interest rate and number of periods. For example, if you invest $100 today at an interest rate of 5% per year, the future value of the investment in 1 year will be $105. Now let's talk about the net present value, NPV. Is the difference between the present value of all future cash inflows and the present value of all future cash outflows. A positive NPV indicates that the investment is likely to be profitable, while a negative NPV indicates that the investment is likely to be unprofitable. Now let's talk about internal rate of return. Is the discount rate that makes the net present value, NPV, of a series of cash flows equal to 0. In other words, it is the annual rate of return that will be earned on an investment or project. An investment requires an initial investment of $100,000 and is expected to generate cash flows of $20,000 per year for the next 5 years. The ROI of the investment is 20%. This means that the investment will earn an annual return of 20%. Now let's talk about interest rate. The interest rate is the percentage of a loan or deposit that is charged or paid as interest over a period of time. It is typically expressed as an annual percentage rate, APR. Interest rates are determined by a variety of factors, including the supply and demand for money, the risk of the borrower, and the central bank's monetary policy. Interest rates can be either fixed or variable. A fixed interest rate remains the same over the life of the loan or deposit. A variable interest rate can change over time, typically in line with market interest rates. Interest rates play an important role in the economy. They affect the cost of borrowing money for businesses and individuals. And they also affect the returns on savings and investments. Here are some examples of interest rates. Prime rate. The prime rate is the interest rate that banks charge their most creditworthy customers. Mortgage rate. The mortgage rate is the interest rate that borrowers pay on a mortgage. Let's apply what we have learned in this session to the Excel. In this data set we have these data: cash flow and number of period and interest rate. And we gonna calculate these metrics: present value, future value, and net present value. Let's starting by the present value. So equal PV. Open parenthesis. Rate is the interest rate. And this NPER is summarizing for the number of period. And this PMT is summarizing for the payment, or in this case the cash flow. The negative sign in present value is normal because that indicates about the cash flow in the investment. Let's calculate the future value. It is the same. But don't to forget to classify the type. 0 is ending of period. And 1 is beginning of it. We need to make Excel recognize that it is the beginning of the period, so we gonna type 1. And now let's calculate the NPV. We gonna learn you the formula only. But in the real world it is a little bit different. Because the limitations of our data. When we launch the financial analysis course, we will talk about those metrics again and more in details and provide real-world example. Hi and welcome again to Excel's master course. In today's session we gonna talk about date and time functions in Excel. We talked about date and time data type in previous session. Are you ready for this session now? In this session you gonna learn about these data and time functions. Date, time, now, today, year. Let's begin with function date. Date is a function that returns the date of specific day when you provide the year, month, and day of it. Date function structure contains year, month, and day. Let's perform it using Excel. Let's first contain column called year. And all values that we'll have is 2023. And then create column called month. And then create column called day. And then create column called date. And we will use the function date to create it. So equal date. Open parenthesis. Specify the year comma. Specify the month comma. Specify the day comma. And use the autofill to the other values. Remember that guys, in programming and coding world, specifically in Excel, there are not standard way to do something. I will create column called also date and it will have the same values of date column. I will just type the date. And then I will use the autofill to the other values. Here it is the same values using two methods. Now let's talk about time function. Time is a function that returns the time of specific moment and second when you provide the hour, minute, and second of it. Time function structure contains hour, minute, and second. Let's perform it using Excel. Let's create 3 column. One for hours, other for minutes, and third for seconds. And let's create a column called time and combine it. So equal time. Open parenthesis. Specify the hour, minute, and second. Now let's talk about now function. It is a function that returns the current date and time formatted as date and time. Let's perform it using Excel. For example, I wanted this cell to has the value of date of today and the time of this minute. So equal now. Open parenthesis, close parenthesis. Now let's talk about today function. It's a function that return the date of the current day. Let's perform it using Excel. I want to give this cell the value of date of today. So equal today. Open parenthesis, close parenthesis. Now let's talk about year function. It is a function that returns the year of given date. Let's perform it using Excel. I want this column to have the year values of that date column. So we will call it year. An equal year. Open parenthesis. Specify the cell. Autofill for the others. In this session you have learned a little bit about date and time functions. Thank you for pay attention. Don't forget to subscribe and apply notification and like the video. See you in the next session. Hi and welcome again to Excel's Master Course. In the previous session we have talked a little bit about date and time functions in Excel. In this session we will complete it. Are you ready? In this session you will learn about those date and time function, month function, day function, hour function, minute function, weekday function, network days function. Let's talk about month function. Month. It is a function that returns the month of given date. Let's do this in Excel. For example, I want this column to have the values of months of this date column. So we gonna call it month. An equal month, open parenthesis. Specify the wanted cell. And I am gonna use the autofill for the other values. Now let's talk about day function. Day. It is a function that returns the day of given date. Let's do this in Excel. For example, I want this column to have the values of days of this date column. So I am gonna call it day. An equal day. Open parenthesis. And select the cell. And now autofill for the others. Now let's talk about hour function. Hour. It is a function that returns the hour of given date. Let's do this in Excel. I am gonna type date data based on the standard date time data type in Excel to make it easily recognized for Excel. I am gonna call it random date. And I am gonna scale it using autofill. I want this column to have the values of hours of this date column. So I am gonna call it hour. An equal hour. Open parenthesis. Select the cell. Then autofill for the others. Now let's talk about minute function. Minute. It is a function that returns the minute of given date. Let's do this in Excel. I want this column to have the values of minutes of the data in this date column. So I am gonna call it minute. An equal minute. Open parenthesis. Specify the wanted cell. And autofill for the others. Now let's talk about weekday function. Weekday returns order of the weekday of the week from a cell representing a date based on specified point. Let's do this in Excel. For example, I want this column to have the value of order of the weekday of this date column. So I am gonna call it weekday. N equal weekday. Open parenthesis. Specify the cell. And after comma. It wants E to specify which is the best order for me. I think that number 2, which begins from Monday to Sunday. So I am gonna type 2. And the autofill for the others. Let's do it again with this data set. Now let's talk about network days function. Network days. It returns the number of network days between two specified dates. Let's do this in Excel. For example, in this data set I want to know how many work days in it, or in other words I want to know how many days except the Saturdays and Sundays. So I gonna call this cell the normal work days. And in this cell equal network days. Open parenthesis. The first date is here. And the second is here. In this session and the previous one you learned what do you have to learn about date and time function in Excel as a data analyst. Thank you for pay attention. Don't forget to subscribe and apply notification and like the video. See you in the next session. Hi and welcome again to Excel's master course. In this session we gonna talk about lookup and reference functions. Are you ready? Let's go. In this session you will learn about these reference and lookup functions. HLOOKUP function. Index function. We have talked before about function called VLOOKUP. Now let's talk about function called HLOOKUP. HLOOKUP is a lookup and reference function that searches for a value in the top row of a table and returns the corresponding value in another row of the table. HLOOKUP is often used to look up data in pivot tables. HLOOKUP function structure contains lookup value, the value that you want to look up in the top row of the table. Table array, the range of cells that contains the table. Row index number, the number of the row in the table from which you want to return the corresponding value. Range lookup, a Boolean value that specifies whether you want an exact match, false, or an approximate match, true. Let's try to perform it in Excel. Let's type random sales data set. I want to get the serial number of the third product. So equal H lookup. Open parenthesis. Lookup value is B1. And the table array is this data set. And I want the third row. Now let's talk about the most important characteristic of HLOOKUP. HLOOKUP looks to the wanted value from up to down, not from down to up. It will give you error message. Let's try to understand it in Excel. For example, I want to get the first value based on knowing the third as a lookup value. So I will try equal HLOOKUP. Open parenthesis. And I will fill all these parameters. It gave me NAOR not available. So pay attention to this feature. HLOOKUP and VLOOKUP are the most complex lookup functions. There are some more easier functions like index. It returns a value from a specified range of cells. It can be used to return a single value, or an entire row or column of values. The structure of index function contains array, the range of cells that contains the values that you want to return. Row number, the row number of the value that you want to return. Column number, the column number of the value that you want to return. Let's try to perform it in Excel. For example, I want this cell to have the value of this cell. So equal index. Open parenthesis. The array is all of these data. The row number is the fourth. And the column number is the third. Here it is. In this session you have learned what do you have to learn about lookup functions as a data analyst. And also we have finished the topic of functions in Excel. Thank you for pay attention. Don't forget to subscribe and apply notification and like the video. See you in the next session.